It's time now for one more thing. Juan.
Well, Neil Diamond, one of my favorites, turned on his heart light last Friday in Colorado for firefighters. Here he is serenading them with Sweet Caroline in a pop-up concert.
Sweet Caroline, times never seem so good, so good, so good.
Famer, who now has Parkinson, rarely performs in public these days, but he was playing for dozens of firefighters who've been battling a massive blaze around Lake Christine in central Colorado, and he's lived in that community for years. The blaze has consumed more than 12,000 acres since the beginning of this month, but thankfully, at the end of the month, we can say it's 80% contained. Thank you so much to Neil Diamond.
All right, the diamond of the table.
Oh, yes, thank you. Well, I
Perino.
have something to promote, which doesn't happen all the time.
Sure.
This Saturday, be sure to come by the Brielle Public Library, that's in Brielle, New Jersey, for a special conversation I'm going to moderate with Christina Alger. She's the author of the new book, The Banker's Wife. I read that book in 6 hours this winter. I couldn't put it down. It's fantastic, great summer reading, great beach read. The event starts at 10 a.m. on Saturday, August 4th. You can RSVP by visiting booktown.com/event. And if you can't make it to that event, of course, you can buy her book wherever you can buy hers and Greg Gutfeld's book. And also tomorrow, there's a very special guest I'm going to have as part of my One More Thing.
Oh, that's exciting. Is
There's
it your
a little
dog?
tease. It's a little tease. I will not even tell you.
All right. Well, I read a book this summer in 5 hours, so there. All right.
Well, little golden books are pretty good.
Oh, I walked right into that one.
Zing!
It was actually the art of the deal. All right, so in France, this guy's got a jet-powered hoverboard jetpack, and check this out. The French actually are better than we think. This guy hovers up in the air and then hovers out into the middle of the ocean. Check this out. Wow. This is the future, folks. You know how Gutfeld always has a bunch of robots playing around and serving you coffee? This is the future right there. People are going to be doing this.
You can get across the water right here real quick.
I know. This is how I'm going to be commuting to work.
What happens if it breaks?
Katie, yeah, I was going to say, Katie was, skydiving and forgot about pulling the string.
Never going to let me live this down.
No strings on the jetpack. All right.
So I consider myself a bit of a connoisseur of liquor stores, but I must say I've never seen this before. You expect to see alligators in Florida, but it's not every day you find one in a convenience store.
What is he doing?
Florida man Robbie Stratton decided to bring an alligator with him while making a beer run. Here he is chasing people around with a reptile, even going into the walk-in fridge with it. Stratton said he was blackout drunk at the time.
Oh, sorry. But
What was that? What is that?
Sorry, but that is so awful, and I'm sorry.
He had tape around his snout.
He's terrorizing people. No, honestly, that is bad. And I'm sorry I just said that. But I mean,
so bad. If anybody deserves to be called that, it's me or that guy. All right, Katie, what do you got?
That is like an armed robbery with a weapon, which is an alligator. Okay, never had Dana say that before. Sorry, guys. This is a story from a local news station, New York One, and we wanted to share it with you. Cesar Pazmino has worked for the Department of Transportation for 27 years. And is in charge of taking care of the flags on the Brooklyn Bridge. There are 2 flags, one on each tower, that fly 24/7 throughout the year. It seems like a fitting job because Cesar was born on the 4th of July and immigrated here from Colombia with his parents when he was 10 years old. Both of his sons are police officers, even more patriotic. He says the hardest and most meaningful part of the job is when he lowers the flags to half-staff to honor fallen police officers or city workers killed on the job. So, Cesar Pazmino, you are amazing. Our hats are off.
he's amazing, and I'm sorry.
Amazing.
I'm sorry.
Amazing show. Set your DVRs. Never miss an episode of The Five. Special report up next. Good luck with Greg Gutfeld.
Can we just go back to what happened there? Dana said what?
No.
We're moving forward?
Show's over.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jesse. President Trump asked his chief of staff to stay on and takes on a pair of Republican mega donors worth billions. The first trial begins from the special counsel investigation, and it has nothing to do with Russia, collusion, or the campaign. And should Americans be able to print their own guns? This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. We begin tonight with a sign of stability in the high turnover Trump White House. Chief of Staff John Kelly says he has accepted the president's offer to stay on through 2020. Multiple reports, stories, and the Washington rumor mill over the past few months had Kelly out of the door as he approached yesterday, his one-year anniversary on the job. Also tonight, President Trump appears to be picking a fight with some of the few Republicans who have more money than he does. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us from the North Lawn with all of that. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. Of all the staff members at the White House, there's likely no one whose status and fate has been the subject of more rumor and speculation than that of Chief of Staff John Kelly. Well, today, all that rumor and speculation went away, at least for a while to come. To paraphrase Mark Twain, the reports of John Kelly's demise have been greatly exaggerated. It was widely rumored and reported that the chief of staff, often described as embattled, had fallen out of favor with the president, had been marginalized, and would likely leave after his year anniversary in the White House. That anniversary came and went yesterday and was accompanied by a tweet showing a beaming Kelly and President Trump with the caption, "Congratulations to General John Kelly. Today we celebrate his first full year as White House Chief of Staff." Today, White House officials told Fox News that the president asked Kelly to stay on through 2020, the end of his first term, and that Kelly accepted. Many of the previous rumors about Kelly had come from within the White House, and his re-upping may portend changes elsewhere in the administration. With General Kelly at his side, President Trump is going to war with the powerful Koch brothers, who are waging a campaign against the president's strategy of using tariffs to leverage new trade deals.
Because of new tariffs, our farmers' livelihoods are at risk. Car makers, factory workers, and manufacturers, too. Farmers want trade, not aid. Tell the administration and Congress open markets and end tariffs.
President Trump took a blowtorch to the Kochs, tweeting they have become a total joke in real Republican circles, that he has beaten them at every turn, and that they are two nice guys with bad ideas. And it's not just tariffs. The Koch network recently announced it's willing to back Democrats over Republicans if the Democrats' policies more closely align with the Koch agenda. A spokesman saying, "We support policies that help all people improve their lives. We look forward to working with anyone to do so." On Monday, the network announced it would not support Republican Kevin Cramer, who was locked in a tight race with North Dakota Democrat Senator Heidi Heitkamp.
Well, it was very disappointing to see yesterday that they are not going to support Kevin Cramer. Heitkamp voted against the tax cuts. She has not been a supporter of the policies the president has put forward.
And as the Trump-Koch feud rages, support for the president from an unexpected quarter. J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon, a former close ally of Barack Obama, praising the president's economic policies.
But the president has done things which accelerated growth. So competitive taxes, we needed competitive taxes. And the way the American public should think about it, for 20 years we've been increasingly uncompetitive, driving capital and brains overseas.
Tonight at a campaign rally in Tampa, President Trump will put his economic policies on the line. He's making an appearance on behalf of Congressman Ron DeSantis, who is vying to become the next governor of Florida. Brett?
See that live right here on Fox. John Roberts, thanks. The Trump administration is studying the idea of implementing what would amount to a big tax break for wealthy Americans by reducing the taxes levied on capital gains. Administration officials say no decision has been made yet on whether to proceed. They say Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin prefers deferring to Congress, but he does have his department studying the economic impact of such a change and the legality of proceeding without congressional approval. Democrats are denouncing this idea. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi says the plan, quote, exposes the true priorities of the GOP tax scam. Facebook says it has uncovered new efforts to meddle in U.S. politics on its platforms, and it says those efforts may be linked to Russia. Facebook officials have already briefed members of Congress. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel has details tonight from Capitol Hill.
14 weeks from Election Day, Facebook announced it has taken down accounts engaged in a sophisticated political influence campaign.
Earlier this morning, we removed 32 pages and accounts from Facebook and Instagram because they were involved in coordinated, inauthentic behavior.
At this stage, the social media giant isn't prepared to blame Russia, at least in public, in part because the account holders tried harder to hide their identities than Russian-based Internet Research Agency did in the past. Facebook says the accounts and pages were created starting in March 2017 using names like Black Elevation, Mindful Being, and Resistors. More than 290,000 accounts followed at least one of the pages.
We do not have enough technical evidence to state definitively who is behind this. But we can say that these accounts engaged in some similar activity and have connected with known IRA accounts.
The pages created 30 events since May 2017. They also ran 150 ads on Facebook and Instagram, paid for with $11,000 in U.S. and Canadian dollars. On Capitol Hill, some members held back judgment.
I'll let Facebook be the ones to really analyze or make attribution to who was behind it.
But other leading lawmakers who were briefed ahead of the announcement are blaming Moscow.
I have a high level of confidence that these accounts, many of them that have been tied to IRA accounts, many of them modeling some of the techniques that were used by the Russians in the past. I can say, I think, with pretty high confidence, I think this is Russian-related.
The Homeland Security Secretary saluted Facebook for responding to the suspicious activity.
Facebook is taking this very seriously, so they should be commended for what they did today. It also shows, though, that this threat is very real, and Americans need to know that. The Russians, or whoever it is in this case, we haven't attributed it, but Russians and other nation states absolutely are attempting to manipulate us.
Facebook describes securing its site like an arms race, like essentially they have to continue battling with these outside groups who continue getting more and more sophisticated. Some lawmakers are now saying it's time for Washington and Silicon Valley to do more. Brett?
Mike, on the Brett Kavanaugh nomination, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senator Dianne Feinstein are demanding hundreds of thousands of documents related to Kavanaugh's work at the White House staff secretary. This afternoon, we heard from the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He responded saying this.
I will not put the American taxpayers on the hook for a Senate Democrats fishing expedition.
So what's the latest on all this?
Well, Grassley's fed up because those Democrats are asking for basically every document that passed through Brett Kavanaugh when he was President George W. Bush's staff secretary. That's a massive gatekeeper role, and that would be a huge amount of documentation. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic leader, has appealed to former President Bush. He's appealed to the National Archivist, and now Grassley feels like he's trying to embarrass him. So what's significant here is two moderate Republican senators, Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, have sided with Chairman Grassley in this battle. That's significant because if those moderates had gone with Schumer, that could really drag out this whole confirmation process.
Yeah.
Brett?
And Senator McConnell says it's going forward October 1st no matter what. Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, thanks. Sure. The Dow gained 108 today. The S&P 500 finished ahead 42. The NASDAQ was up 18. The first day of the first trial has just ended for one of candidate Trump's top advisors, his former campaign chairman. A jury was seated today in the case of Paul Manafort, the first case brought to trial by special counsel Robert Mueller. But jurors will not hear anything about alleged Russia collusion or any of the other special counsel headlines. Correspondent Peter Ducey is outside the federal courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia tonight to tell us what this key case is about. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Brett. The court session just ended for the day, but a little bit earlier this afternoon, while prosecutors working for Robert Mueller tried to nail Paul Manafort for financial crimes by outlining his lavish lifestyle, the judge interrupted and told the Mueller team it's not against the law to have a lot of money. So the burden of proof on the special counsel is proving to be heavy. Lawyers for the man who was with the Trump campaign for just 5 months are fighting to keep him out of a federal prison for 305 years. Paul Manafort is charged with falsifying income tax returns, failing to report foreign accounts, and committing bank fraud. Tied to $60 million, the special counsel alleges he was paid as a consultant to Ukrainian politicians and then hid from the IRS.
The chances of Paul Manafort trying to reach some kind of deal has passed us.
A speedy jury selection wrapped up by lunch. impeach, and a list of witnesses set to testify against Manafort, including former Trump aide Rick Gates and former Bernie Sanders strategist Tad Devine, has been presented. The presiding judge, T.S. Ellis, is the same one who challenged the special counsel's focus on financial charges for Manafort back in May, saying then, quote, "You don't really care about Mr. Manafort. You really care about what information Mr. Manafort can give you to lead you to Mr. Trump and an impeachment or whatever." The trial proceeded anyway. Today, White House officials indicated they're not involved.
The judge has very strictly instructed no mention of Paul Manafort's role in the Trump campaign. Don't mention Trump, don't mention Russia, don't mention collusion. This trial obviously centers on matters that have nothing to do with the campaign.
In 2016, Manafort initially joined the Trump campaign to help navigate a possible contested convention.
There's not going to be a second ballot, so there's not an issue.
Manafort later rose to campaign chairman and sat in on the infamous Trump Tower meeting with Russians allegedly offering dirt on the Clinton campaign. Last month, the president said Manafort's short stint with the Trump team should have made him an oversight to Robert Mueller.
I think a lot of it's very unfair. I mean, I look at some of them where they go back 12 years. Like Manafort has nothing to do with our campaign. But I feel I feel a little badly about it.
Now Manafort's legal team needs to convince the jury to have the same kind of sympathy as the president, because his fate is controlled by 6 men and 6 women from Virginia.
I don't think you go into this thinking, well, even if I get convicted, I still may get a pardon. I think that's a big risk.
Late this afternoon, the Mueller team called their first witness. It was the former Bernie Sanders strategist and colleague of Paul Manafort, Tad Devine, who was actually pretty complimentary of Manafort, but his testimony served to establish Manafort's deep business ties in Ukraine. Somebody, though, whose name was never mentioned by that witness or the Mueller team or the defense team, Donald Trump. Brett?
Peter Ducey outside the courthouse. Peter, thanks. Now to news overseas. Iranian officials say if President Trump wants to talk, the U.S. must rejoin the Iran nuclear deal he left last spring. That terse response comes after the president said he would negotiate with anybody. Correspondent Rich Edson has more reaction tonight from the State Department.
President Trump says he would meet with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. Iran says the president should forget it. Foreign Minister Javad Zarif tweeted the two countries have already spoken, negotiating a nuclear agreement and, quote, threats, sanctions, and PR stunts won't work. Try respect for Iranians and for international commitments. President Trump says his administration is implementing an aggressive stance towards Iran. Still, the president says he's prepared to talk.
No preconditions, no. They want to meet, I'll meet anytime they want.
Though his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, then appeared to outline conditions.
If the Iranians demonstrate a commitment to make fundamental changes in how they treat their own people, reduce their malign behavior, can agree that it's worthwhile to enter a nuclear agreement that actually prevents proliferation, then the president said he's prepared to sit down and have a conversation with them.
Though the State Department says the president's offer to meet without conditions stands.
The president said that, and the secretary have both said that.
In less than a week, the Trump administration will begin imposing additional sanctions on Iran, restrictions the United States once lifted as part of the Iran nuclear agreement. Iran and the countries remaining in the nuclear deal, China, Russia, Britain, France, and Germany, are trying to salvage the agreement without the U.S. The threat of additional U.S. sanctions has already forced European businesses to scrap investments in Iran. Iran's foreign minister is pressuring the Europeans to ignore potential U.S. sanctions penalties and invest in Iran anyway.
Europeans should decide whether their businessmen, banks, and governments are to pursue European interests or American interests, or in particular, Trump's interests.
And while the U.S. maintains economic pressure, the administration continues its assault on Iran's leadership.
They seem more concerned with riches than religion.
Last week, Secretary Pompeo called Iran's leaders hypocritical holy men that resemble a mafia more than a government, who have enriched themselves at the expense of Iran's citizens. Iran's government is also confronting protests and economic anxiety. The value of Iran's currency has fallen dramatically this year against the U.S. dollar, dropping to a new low. Meanwhile, prices for food and medicine are rising. Brett?
Rich Edson live at the State Department. Rich, thank you. American intelligence officials say North Korea is building new long-range missiles despite ongoing disarmament talks with the U.S. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott tells us how this squares with recent promises of nuclear disarmament.
North Korea is at it again. U.S. officials confirming to Fox News Pyongyang continues work on its missile program. Analysis of satellite photography indicates recent activity at a factory which builds long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of targeting the United States. As many as 2 missiles are said to be in production. It's business as usual, the official told Fox.
The South Korean government is closely watching North Korean movements and closely working with the United States.
This comes after last week's news that the North also continues to produce fissile material for nuclear bombs. And after last month's commitment to work towards denuclearization by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the summit with President Trump. Experts say he didn't promise to halt nuclear activity now.
They're basically staying true to what Kim has been saying, which is that he's going to start mass producing fissile material, but also missiles.
Still, the talking continues. Today at the DMZ, generals from North and South Korea met again to work on regional issues that might lead to bigger things.
I believe processing inter-Korean issues is a meaningful initial step to ease military tensions.
The North has made concessions, the blowing up of a nuclear test site, the dismantling of a missile engine test facility, and the return of the remains of what's believed to be 55 U.S. service members missing since the Korean War, set to be repatriated back to Hawaii tomorrow.
We've told Chairman Kim, if we can denuclearize your country, there is a brighter future for the North Korean people.
Chairman Kim might want more.
I think from North Korea's perspective, they've done a lot, and I suspect that they're building some momentum for asking the U.S. for concessions.
Those concessions to North Korea could mean an easing of sanctions or the signing of a peace treaty, both of which the U.S. is not yet ready to do. No one said this was going to be easy. Brett.
Greg Palcott, thank you. Turkey's state-run media says a court has rejected an American pastor's appeal for his release from house arrest and refused to lift his travel ban. The court ruled there was no change in the strong criminal suspicion against Pastor Andrew Brunson. He faces up to 35 years in prison in Turkey if convicted of terror and espionage. President Donald Trump is threatening sanctions against Turkey over this case. Turkey insists it will not give in. Up next, we have some breaking news we're following. We'll bring you right after the break. The latest on the massive and deadly wildfires burning through much of California. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 17 in Des Moines, where officials say they still do not know what happened to a 20-year-old Iowa college student who vanished nearly 2 weeks ago. Molly Tibbetts disappeared near Brooklyn, Iowa. One of the chief investigators says they are chasing every possible lead. Fox 29 in San Antonio, Texas, with the safe return of a shark stolen from the city's aquarium. Police say they have confessions from 2 men involved in snatching the 2 to 3 foot long gray horn shark and rolling it out of the facility in a baby stroller Saturday. Police tracked down the getaway pickup truck last night. And this is a live look at Philadelphia from our affiliate Fox 29. The big story there tonight, the first member of a Penn State University fraternity to plead guilty in connection with the hazing death